best hair in the trucking industry. Seriously, I don't care about hair, so that's the reason why if you've been watching this channel, you've seen my hair go crazier and crazier, and then all of a sudden it gets buzzed down. It's because I used to go to a barber, but since I don't care about hair, I decided to save the money, and I was given a pet hair trimmer. So basically, it was brand new. So I put a number 3 on there and buzzed the head down and saved the money. So that's the reason why in probably the next week or two, you're probably going to see me buzz it all down. And that will be a little bit more insight as to this person that you're watching. Anyway, let's start off with the Rand McNally shortages for the week. I was paid for 2,073 miles and I drove 2,175 miles. So I was shorted by about 102 miles. All right, so I guess that's not as bad this week. Still, it amounts to like $60, something like that. 63, 65, something like that. Anyway, so oddly, I was pre-assigned a load after I had been off for all of 24 hours. And I wasn't even going back to my truck for 36 hours, but I was pre-assigned a load. And so I contacted the office and said, I'm not going to be back to the truck for like, a day and a half. So, or I won't be starting up for another day and a half. So I'll gladly do this one, but it'll be late according to the information on there. And so they pulled the load. And then I was pre-assigned a load during the last episode while I was recording it. Now, here's what I'm going to say. It ended up actually, funny thing is, it ended up being to the exact same place, which is Amazon in Garden City. I have no idea. It was not the same load though. I have no idea why I was pre-assigned something almost 2 days in advance. But I was. And I tell you, after that last episode, recording right there, I decided I was going to sleep in my bed as opposed to doing what I normally do and drive in and then sleep, wake up in the truck, and then start the work. Because I tell you, this bed is so uncomfortable, in my opinion. It is a mattress. What is it? It's a memory foam or something like that. But it's really stiff, and I just don't like it. I can't ever get comfortable. It's stiff in the wrong places. Doesn't matter if it's cold or hot. The only time it's ever really nice is when it's cold and my truck idles all night. Usually when it's that cold, it's good. Because when the truck is idling, I know that I don't have to worry about my CPAP dying because the power inverter will go out. Now, I did come to find out that you can apply for something with you have to talk to your manager, but you can get something, and I actually wrote a note here. It is called Medical Equipment Request Form. You can have the manager fill that out. And what this will do is it will give you the manager will submit it, and you can drop your truck off, and it'll take them about an hour to do. But what they will do is they will add another separate power inverter that runs off of a different battery. And that battery going to the power inverter will be just enough to run a CPAP all night. So if you work for JB Hunt, you can ask for this if you have a CPAP. So word to the wise, there you go. Now, here's the one thing I'm gonna say is I seriously prefer to sleep in my own bed. I sleep much better, and it's a lot better than this truck. And I'm starting to get stir crazy. Not so much being in this truck, but the working almost 70 hours in 5 days and being off for 40 hours. I know this is a lot less because I'm only working 5 days than a lot of people, because it's technically like 4.5 days, because you go home halfway through after you've worked 4 days, you go home on your 5th day, like halfway through the 24-hour cycle. So technically it's better than working 6 days and going home for the 34 reset. But then I am to the point where I am done with working 6 days or more, living on the road and that kind of stuff. So I am much happier working 5 days and then ending it there. Now, here's the thing. I was sleeping in my bed, and I got a message nearly 5 hours before I was starting up saying that my truck was ready. I had received a message earlier that said my truck was, I think that was during that recording, that said that my truck was actually going to be ready in an hour. But since I decided as soon as I was done recording, I just went over to my bed, laid down, went to sleep. And then I received another message because I forgot to turn off the ringer. And the message came through and said, your truck is now ready. But if I would have driven in and then tried to get in the truck, it may not have been ready just yet. So I'm glad that I stayed there in my bed. And then I got up and went on in, and there was no traffic, so it was all well and good. Now, here's what I'm going to say. I kind of came to a realization. A lot of the times when I first start up on my Sunday, or my Monday technically, but it's Sunday night, there's a shortage of people in the office. Normally, between at least in Southeast Regional, between about 2, 3, 4 a.m. and about 6. They don't really answer the phone. The only time people answer the phone during that time is they'll answer if they're local. But they do not have the ability to put loads on us. They can't handle most of our issues. So if I can't get someone who's in Southeast Regional, then I am out of luck. So in this capacity, JB Hunt is not the best for overnight drivers. Now, I have reached out to the manager that I first had, that seems to be the higher ranking manager, and I sent him an email saying that I have observed that there is a lack of support in the office during certain times. And I have a background in management, and so I was saying, would you pass on my message or connect me with someone that I could talk to about potentially getting hired on as whoever the person is that operates the phones and works on the computer and that kind of stuff, because it would take me off the road for one, which I wouldn't be against, mainly because it would be a lot less hours, and hopefully it would pay about the same, if not more. I don't know if it would pay more or if it would pay less if drivers are paid more, or if, because I'm a hustler, if I actually do get paid more than that role. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm at least going to inquire. So I've sent an email, and we'll see if it's forwarded or whatever. If not, I'll just go into the office sometime and talk to the senior level manager. But here's what I'm going to say. Is because the office has a 2 or 3 hour gap where you can't get a load. On Sunday night, make sure you have a load. If you drive overnight and it looks like you're going to be dropping off your load sometime between about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, something like that a.m., make sure you have a pre-assignment by at least 1 or so. By 2 at the very latest. Because if you don't, then you may be waiting for a pre-assignment, and you don't want to do that to yourself. Anyway, that was something I kind of came to a realization of. And so I wanted to share that. My Monday, which was technically Sunday, I got to the truck and I was ready to start by 9:45, and guess what? I did. Because I was already going to the Garden City Amazon. Now, I was to go to Amazon, but first I had to go to Atlanta in Lot 12 to pick up my load. And then here's the interesting thing. The number that Amazon needs in order for you to drop off the load wasn't in the app. I thought it was, but apparently I got the number wrong, because every Amazon requires a different number. Sometimes it's a PO number, sometimes it's a whatever number. Sometimes it starts with 11, sometimes it starts with something else, and sometimes it starts with something else, and it's like, and this particular location, I had the other numbers, but not the one number that they actually needed. So when I got there, the lady was like, yeah, I need to have this one number, and or I can't accept this. So I was like, okay. I called the office and told them. They said, wait 30 minutes. 30 minutes became an hour. And then an hour became almost 2. I called and only spoke to local because nobody was in Southeast Regional. And he said no one was going to be coming into Southeast Regional until about 5 or 6 a.m. And then they can send me a load. So I was pretty frustrated about that, because a planner, they said, planners won't even come in until, between about 6 and 6:30. Then they'll start looking at things. So if I can get a planner on the phone, then that would be most ideal. But they don't answer the phone. So I'm going to try to get a fleet manager, if I could, before the planner comes in, and see if they'll give me something. And I'll just say, look, I've been here waiting for hours and without a load. Can you give me something? Anyway, so I as I was waiting there, I was double checking my DRT, and then suddenly it jumped to 6:20 a.m. with 0 hours remaining. 6:20 a.m. with 0 hours remaining. I have no idea why. Because I was on top of my DRT, and there was nobody in the office. So as I called, I finally, after like an hour and a half at the Amazon, I finally got someone to answer the phone. And that person was in local, and they told me, I said, yeah, I set my DRT a long time ago. And they said, well, it's set for 6:20 a.m. at 0 hours remaining. I said, what? 15 minutes ago it wasn't. So anyway, I told him, I was so frustrated that happened. But anyway, so he told me that the Southeast Regional guys weren't going to be coming in. So I waited and waited. And in the meantime, he sent an email to Amazon to see if they could try to get the number that I needed. He could at least do that. And I personally find it very unacceptable that they have people working, but literally do not have somebody in the office. They do not have someone planning. They do not have any support in the office. And you could say, well, that's the downfall of driving overnight. The thing about it is that's between like 4 and 6 a.m. There's a lot of drivers out during that time. So how can you justify having a lot of drivers out? Because a lot of drivers will start early, and yet there's no one to support them. To me, that's very bad. That's very disorganized. It's not like Schneider, where they only had 2 people for like 200 drivers or something like that in the pods account, but we knew what their hours were. But our account wasn't even open until like 6 a.m. until 3, whatever the local time was. But the office was open between 8 a.m., I think Central Time, and like 2 or 3 p.m. The biggest issue I ran into with Schneider is that they never answered their phones. And there was long hold times. Anyway, I just find it very unacceptable that we have so many people that are capable of working in the office, but there's this big lapse of support for big chunks of the night. So anyway, hopefully this will be something that I can talk to them about and maybe even fill that position. Anyway, I don't know. 2.5 hours after I arrived, I finally got someone in Southeast Regional, and he was slammed because he was dealing with drivers calling in about nonstop issues. And he told me to go ahead and drop the load in the drop yard that was like 2 miles away, and then grab an empty, and then pre-assign me to go to West Rock to pick up a load. Now, before I left, I asked the Amazon that I was at, is it okay if I grab an empty? And she said, yeah, I can't give you one until after 6. And I was like, it's 5:50 a.m. right now, so no worries. So I dropped off that container and then went straight back over there. And she said, okay, well, we have a guy that's just coming in. It was like 6:10, 6:15, whatever it was, a.m. And he says, yeah, I need a pro number or a PO number or something like that. And I said, I gave him the old number, the one that I wasn't able to drop off. He says, but we don't have this yet. And I'm like, yes, because I'm just trying to get it empty. He says, well, I need to have a number. I'm like, well, he's like, well, call your office, see if they'll give you. I'm like, no, I'm not wasting any more time here. I've already wasted almost 3 hours between waiting at the Amazon, going and dropping it off, and then coming back because I was told I could get an empty here. I'm not going to waste any more time. So anyway, I got frustrated, and at that point, I decided I was going to go to my trusty old Walmart DC, which was about 4 or 5 miles away, 6 miles away, whatever it is. And this is the first time they said, no, we're not giving out empties. So he called and they said, we're not giving out empties. So I called back and I got the same guy on the phone because he was the only guy working on the phones. And I said, hey, got a question. I'm the guy you just got through sending to West Rock. And you told me to grab an empty. Savannah is notoriously bad and hard to find an empty. I said, can you look at West Rock and see if they're over in their pool, or if I would be able to get an empty from West Rock if I were there? And he looked and said, well, they're like 21 over their pool. So yeah, why don't I just go ahead and dispatch you, and you can go straight to West Rock and just pick up the load. I'm like, thank you. That's what I was asking. So he's like, sure, I'll go ahead and dispatch you. I'm like, so happy about that. That way I didn't have to deal with any of this garbage. Anyway, West Rock is a well-oiled machine, that particular West Rock in Dublin. So I got there and I was on my way to Fairburn. Now, due to all the wasted time, I didn't get to go to Fairburn, but instead I had to shut down in Palmetto because I was out of time. Because when I got to West Rock, my hours were low. Normally, if you drive someplace and you drop and pick up, and it takes 30, 45 minutes, however long it takes there. And then you go to another place and you drop off and pick up, and it takes 30, 45 minutes or whatever else. You still have your 3 hours. You're still working down your 3 hours as long as you change into either on duty or yard move when you're at a customer site. So that way you are driving around their yard without ruining your drive time. But I had literally gone to Atlanta, out of Atlanta, to Garden City, and then sat there between there and dropping off, and then trying to find an empty. I blew through 3.5, like my entire waiting clock, and like half an hour into my drive clock. So by the time I went to West Rock, and then I was driving back to Atlanta, I did not have time to drop off in Fairburn. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to shut down in Palmetto. I was at least able to get there, so I shut down in the drop yard there in Palmetto. And I figured I would start my day off on my Tuesday, and I would go straight over there, drop off in Fairburn, and then pick up whatever container I was going to be pre-assigned to and head out. That was my plan, at least. On my Tuesday, I got up. I sure as the world dropped off in Fairburn, but someone was in my TTR spot. It assigned me to drop in TTR spot like $3.99 or whatever it was. I think it was. And so I dropped in, I think, 407. And in the meantime, I tried calling nonstop the rail yard. And they did not answer for 20 minutes, so I hung up and called back. They still did not answer for 20 minutes, so I hung up and called back. And I did this over and over again until someone answered over an hour later. Now, why was I still in there for over an hour? It's because when I dropped that container off, and I was calling the rail to let them know that I dropped in 407 because someone else was in 399, which is what I was assigned. But I was assigned to pick up a chassis and drop and go to the TTR and wait for my container. Now, there had been a lot of turmoil going on in this particular rail yard because weather delays. They had already shut down at one point during the bad weather, and they were not allowing people in and out. So that meant that Palmetto flooded with containers. Ended up happening again. So they ended up filling up on containers, and it's like, don't drop any more containers in Palmetto. It's like, what are you supposed to do? If you can't drop off a container in Palmetto, they say no more load drop-offs in Palmetto. What are you supposed to do? Drive to Lithia Springs? They have no room there. You're supposed to drive over to Forest Park? That's not an intermodal terminal. So I don't know what they would recommend doing because I wasn't affected by that because the very first shutdown I wasn't working. Later this week, I did have to shut down, but then I didn't have to go back to Fairburn. I was sent to other rail yards. I'll get there though. So anyway, pick up a chassis and then go to the TTR and wait for your container. Now, I went to try to pick up my chassis, the one that was assigned to me. It wasn't there. No surprise there. Usually when they assign, they tell you to pick up a chassis, it's because they know that there's an empty chassis someplace. They tell you to do it, but somebody else has already grabbed it. So I went to the TTR, grabbed a chassis, and then went and put it in. Now, it was after I put it in, I was walking around to do a little bit more thorough pre-trip because I tried to do a pre-trip that's just bare bones in order for me to get into my spot in the TTR. Then I do a very thorough pre-trip of the chassis. And that's when I discovered a few things. One of the turning indicators on the rear, one of the four ways turning indicator, whatever you want to call it, it was burned out. There was another one that was not, it didn't have the rubber gasket around there. And the light for the license plate was burned out as well. So I ended up jumping out of TTR, took this chassis over, dropped it in the bad chassis lot, and said, okay, and now I got to go find another one. I felt bad because I'd already grabbed one. But this time I decided I was just going to grab one of the TTR and go on over there, and I made the change, jumped over there. Now, here's what was interesting. I was there in the yard for quite a while. And I realized something. The cranes were not moving behind me. The cranes on the far end were. I was way down at like 479 was the slot I was dropping in. 479. I know that because that number means something to me. And when I got there, there was a crane back to my left and there was a crane back to my right. Neither one of them moved. And I'm watching them and I'm like, they haven't moved, they still haven't moved. Trying to get the rail on the phone didn't happen. Remember, I told you I was like waiting 20 minutes. So I call I call Palmetto. I call JB Hunt and I tell them the cranes aren't moving. They said, well, you got to wait for a couple hours, because we're supposed to wait 2 hours in the yard. And if it can't be delivered within 2 hours, then you can leave. I'm like, or we'll reassign you. I'm like, that's the duration. I guess it's because they don't want to end up, they don't have to pay you for the first hour and they will pay you only $20 for the second. So it's no biggie for them to have you wait because they're only paying you $20 for the 2 hours you're waiting. Back to Schneider, basically, rates. But I was continuing to call the rail, and finally I got through and I told them that I went to drop off in 399. There was somebody there, so I dropped in 407, and the guy was like, well, if you're telling me it was 407 and we already picked up that container and it goes to the wrong place, that's going to be back on you. I'm like, no, it won't, because I've been calling you guys for over an hour. No one's been answering, and there's no way in the app for me to tell you guys. So it's not on me. Y'all haven't been answering your phone for over an hour, just saying. So anyway, I said, I've been trying to reach you to let you know this is you're the first person I've gotten on the phone. Anyway, I said, so hate to be blunt about that, but can you do me a favor and tell me I'm in TTR 479 and I'm not seeing the cranes move? He says, yeah, those cranes are broken. I'm like, great. Well, he's like, so. And there's no ETA for them being repaired either. I'm like, beautiful. So at this point, I had already told him that the spot I parked in. So I went ahead and called back my office and I said, hey, the cranes are broken. They can't deliver this container to me. So can you assign me something else? Then they did. So it was Target, which was just north of Charlotte, was pulled for me, and instead I was given the Walmart in Shelby, North Carolina that I've been to before. Had to outgate Bobtail because the app is so stupid. You have to outgate Bobtail and then come right back in Bobtail in order for it to tell you where you're going to go. Now, this container, luckily, because I said, do you have something that's already on the chassis? Because I'd really appreciate that. I've already wasted, a bunch of time here this morning. And so they assigned me this and it was ready to go. I was like so happy. Anyway, Walmart, by the time I got it there, quick and easy. I was in and out of there, no problem. And then I was pre-assigned to go to the First Tissue in Anderson, South Carolina. And I like that place because, not just because the last time that I was there was Christmas morning and they gave me fudge. The security person gave me fudge, because they gave me a choice of like 6 different things between cookies and whatever. Because it was Christmas morning. They were like, here, you're working Christmas. I'm working Christmas. What would you like? And she gave me some fudge. And I was like, oh, this is great. That's the last time I had been there though. And I like this First Tissue. First of all, Anderson's not very far away. So I can usually get up there and get back, drop off, as long as it's not rush hour, and usually get out of the city again with another load. But also, it's a well-oiled machine. You get up there, they give you the place to drop off, they give you the space where you're picking up, you're out of there real quick and easy. It's probably one of the most organized places. Also, you're talking face-to-face with someone, not through an intercom. So it's not like Amazon where there's someone you can't even understand coming through a distorted speaker, and then you're like, huh, I'm sorry, repeat that. And then they don't always have the right information. So this is a face-to-face thing. Anyway, it was great. Here's the thing that kept happening to me this particular day. The tablet kept jumping me out of yard move. And I'm not exceeding 20 miles an hour. As a matter of fact, I made a point to not exceed 15 after the first time it jumped me out of yard move. And that was when I got to the Walmart. So I was like, okay. So I had already driven for over 3 hours. I was hoping to have Walmart. And so since I jumped out there and had to open up the back for them to see that it was empty, and I went back and I said, should I drive on? And I looked down and I said, wait a minute, why am I in drive? And I'm like, I was at 27 minutes when I pulled up there, and it was still in yard move when I came to a stop and pulled the brakes. So I was like, it jumped me into drive. So I got so annoyed. Anyway, I got to first issue, and this time I was 27 minutes into my break, and I come to a stop again. I'm like watching it. This time when I come to a stop, it goes to on duty. I'm like, so this time I sit there and wait an additional 3 minutes until I see the thing say brake has been satisfied. So at this point, I close GeoTab, which is, press the button, swipe up, close it, reopen it to make sure that it's gone through. Yes, it had gone through this time. So that's when I hit the road. But that was, to me, quite annoying because it happened to me twice that day. But luckily, I caught it that second time. Now, this was Martin Luther King Day that I was driving on that particular Monday. So the interstates were extremely light. And I was very, very happy about that. So I got to Fairburn with 2 hours remaining on my clock. And I dropped off my container in the TTR and went to try to pick up my pre-assignment, and it was all messed up. First of all, it was telling me to go to track 2 TTR 980. I'm like, what in the world does that mean? Track 2, I get it. TTR 980, there is no 980. TTR ends at like 520 or something like that. It's like a mile of TTR or whatever it is. So anyway, I had to ask what that was. I asked one of the yard jockeys, and he says, okay, if it says TTR track 2, 3, whatever, he says, this is track 2 right here. He tells me you're in the right place. He says 980 means that it's going to be that your container is going to be in the first 980 feet of the track that you can actually access there. So I was like, okay. So he says, drive up and down here, and you should, in this first area here, see your container. I drove around, did not see it. I drove around the other side, did not see it. Drove up and down all over the place. Then I asked someone else just to double check it. He told me the same thing. I was like, okay. This time I called up the rail. They answered me. And they said, oh, yeah, your container isn't there anymore. It's been moved to Lot E. I'm like, oh, well, the app is telling me that it's still at TTR 9. No, it's in Lot E. Go look for it. I'm like, okay, well, there's 10 rows in Lot E. Which one's it in? Lot E. Lot E, WHE, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And she's like, I don't know, go look for it, then hangs up on me. So anyway, I'm like, okay, great. So she has attitude. I go and start at Lot 2, go through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then 1. I don't see it. I drive back through a second time, and then I make a point to always drive back the opposite direction that you went through the first time. That way, in case there's a container that you approaching a different angle sometimes helps you to see it. Anyway, then I started driving through a third time, and I'm so frustrated at this point because I'm confident that container's not in there. So I call the Fairburn office back again, and I say, hey, where is this container? And they said, it's in Lot E. I'm like, it's not in Lot E. I'm in Lot E. I'm driving around looking for it. It's not here. It's in Lot E. Just look for it. You'll find it. Disconnect. So I am so frustrated at this point. They have a bad attitude. They're not telling me right information. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? I've driven all around there. I'm going to try looking in other places. It wasn't trackside. It had been moved. So at this point, I drive all the way down 2. I drive all the way down 3. And then I say, I'm going to drive down F. Well, guess what? I found it in row F. I'm sorry, row 4 in F. Now, by the time I found it, I was at less than 45 minutes on my 14 and 11 hour clock because of all the stupid delays earlier in the TTR and stuff. And there was a Schneider truck that was just pulling up. And unfortunately, because this was so tight that they had backed in, and literally it was like a foot and a half away from the Schneider truck. By the time I pulled in, I'm like, I need to just pull forward, let this girl connect up to this Schneider trailer, because otherwise she'll never get out. And she was not getting out to do pre-trip it. So I pulled forward and just waited. She finally picked up the container and moved it out and finished her pre-trip. I was able to back in there. I pre-tripped it. I pulled it out. I was so frustrated because the office misled me multiple times. The app wasn't cooperating, and now the app was frozen, not letting me outgate properly. because it was just saying, well, did you go to trackside 2, TTR 980? And I'm like, sure I did. I click OK, and then it locks up. It freezes. It doesn't give me a QR code. So I get up to the thing, and I realize that the app must be down. So I have to stand in the line, and now I'm watching my 45 minutes going away. And finally, I get up there, and the guy who's working as a guard, this is the first guy in a while that's giving me attitude. It must have just been a bad day at the CSX. The guy's like, okay, where are you? I said, I'm down at the end. He says, no, I need you to tell me what number it is on the intercom. So I run over there, and I come back in. I say, it's 14. He said, yeah, so it's 14. That's what I thought it was. He's like, all right, so what's your trailer number? I tell him, what's your CDL number? I give him all the information. He says, okay, now you're good to go. Attitude. I jump behind the wheel. I now have 15 minutes left on my clock because I wasted 2 hours in this stupid rail yard. Anyway, luckily Palmetto was right around the corner. I jump on, I pull out of there. I'd hang a left. I drive up to, and I was expecting to run into a train or something like that. Luckily I didn't. So, I got to Palmetto. I was able to pull straight through, which was very tight, but I was able to pull through, and I had to go forward back a couple of times. But while I was going forward and backwards, I went ahead and hit on duty because I was already in the spot technically, but and I went ahead and said pre-trip or post-trip because, you know, you don't want to be in the drive line when that happens. Anyway, I still got in the space anyway. Within my clock, but you know, got finalized in my space before my clock expired, and I went ahead and did post trip and did a very did a fast one initially, and then I logged out, and then I finished it because I didn't want to run over 14 hours on my clock. But I was almost done anyway, so it's not like it was a very long one. I didn't want to be out, have it expire, have to come back in. So I sat back in here, and I was like watching it for the last 2 minutes. So it probably was, even if I had stayed out there, I just didn't want to run the risk of my clock expiring, even though technically I could expire the 14 as long as I'm not driving again, and it wouldn't be an issue. I don't want to even go there just in case JB Hunt says, no, you expired your clock. You're not going to be working for another 8 days, even though technically technically it wouldn't hurt anything because I didn't hit the drive line, and that's not a violation. But anyway, so I basically used all the time that I had on the post trip for my post trip, which was less than 10 minutes. But you know, you technically want to do 15 minutes as your post trip, but I went ahead and checked the exhaust and checked under the hood and checked the tires and stuff like that, and then I came back in anyway, so was done there. So my Wednesday, I was hoping to hit the road and drive all the way to Harbor Freight in Dillon, South Carolina early, because that was what I was doing, and then get a pre-assignment that I could do fast and hit the road coming back. Now that was a good, nice 330-mile run. Now, interestingly enough, the planner sent me a live load for 10 a.m. So I was starting up already at like 9:30. So a 10 a.m. live load on a pre-assignment doesn't work. So I was like, okay, so I stopped for fuel along my way. And that's when I called the office and said, okay, I was pre-assigned a live load at 10 a.m. I don't know why I would have been assigned that, because my DRT was already set for like 2 a.m. or whatever it was that I was going to be arriving there. 2, 3, whatever it was. And I said, my clock will be expiring. So this is the first time they had told me I can reject a load. It says accept or decline. And when you hit decline, he says, yeah, just decline it and say the reason. But it wants you to give it an updated date and time. And when you decline the load, it says update your date and time for your and give us a reason. So when I declined it, I gave an updated date and time. And it says, okay, we've updated your time. And it says, okay, it's fine. I'm like, this is not what it was supposed to do. So at this point I get frustrated because all it did was update the time for when I was supposed to get there. But I was like, you know, this is a company that I can guarantee isn't going to be open until like 6, 7, something like that a.m. And this is a 10 a.m. live load. So anyway, so I call and I tell them, I am not going to be able to do that because my clock's going to expire at 11:30 a.m. at the very latest because I started up at 9:30. And he was like, okay, well, I'll go ahead and inform the planners. Right before I got to drop off my load in Harbor Freight, it was pulled from me. And I was very, very happy. Now, the thing I wasn't happy about was that as I was leaving the Palmetto yard, all was well. I mean, like when I first get out of bed and I go into the bathroom inside the building to go to the restroom, brush teeth, whatever I'm going to do, I noticed that there was a train going by. And so normally if there's a train going by, then I know that 30 minutes later it should be gone or nearly gone. So at this point, I'm looking and listening, and I'm like, okay, so it seems like it's clear. So I've already pre-tripped. So I'm like, all right, we're good. So I pull out, and as soon as I'm pulling out of JB Hunt, ding, 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 and great, I'm delayed by a train. But it was not just a regular train. This one was over half an hour long, closer to 45 minutes. So I'm delayed by this stupid train. Anyway, now this is, I will add, there is the train at Palmetto, you can pull to go over the train tracks to get onto whatever the road is over there. Or you can go straight and go down to the yard. Well, this was just blocking the road over to the other thing, so I could go onto the rail yard. I decided I was going to try to go on over to the rail yard and see if I could go past and there was no train there so that I could get on, get past there, just basically staying on this side of the road, never crossing over to the other side. But no, that's where I got stuck, is right at the rail yard for 45 minutes. So that was annoying. I got back, I started to drive out towards South Carolina, and right as I was approaching Madison, I had a tire blowout. So I ended up pulling over on 20 eastbound at exit 113 in the first exit in Madison, where Love's is to the left and there's a Chevron or whatever to the right. I ended up calling emergency roadside, and the guy took like an hour to get there. Now, not just did the tire blow out, but it also took the mud flap and the bracket. Now, that is not something that emergency roadside can fix. They carry mud flaps, but they do not carry the brackets because there's different trailers and whatever, I guess, for the different brackets. So he does not carry that. And so as soon as I was done with this, remember, I've already been delayed a bunch this day. So I was hoping to actually start my day early and have all this time to have my 3-hour clock to do all my business and stuff at the different stops. But no, it got chewed up with the stupid rail delay for 45 minutes and with the waiting for the tire blowout situation. I then decided I was going to go ahead and pull on over at Madison 114, the Pilot, fuel up, and I went inside to see if they had a bracket. They don't sell the bracket. Not, at least that particular one didn't. And it says, yeah, we don't sell the bracket for the mud flaps. So I was like, great. So I'm not going to go back to the rail yard. I'm going to go ahead, and it's in the middle of the night, I'm going to go ahead and drive on over there. So I did a mid-trip, pre-trip, after I got the tire replaced, and marked it up, and it shows like this red thing that says, you must address this issue before you're allowed to leave. And I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't affect the safety, is what the button that I pressed. I said, doesn't affect the safety, because that was one of the, it was like, it's been resolved, it's not been resolved, or it doesn't affect the safety of the trucks moving, or something like that. Forgot the exact wording. I'm like, well, that's the one that applies, because it doesn't affect the truck safety, even though it's technically not good if I'm pulled over for a level 1 inspection or something like that. It's in the middle of the night. I decided it was probably going to be okay. So when I got to the Harbor Freight, I arrived at 5:30 a.m. Now, first of all, it took 45 minutes for me to get checked in because they had 3 different lanes, but one of them seemed like it was open, and then another truck pulls up into the second lane over, and then I'm like, I get out after a while. I'm like, what's the delay? He says, well, go on over to the third lane, and so I go to the third lane, and as soon as I pull up, the guy in the second lane moves. Anyway, they're going so slow. It takes 45 minutes for me to get in and out of there. I write up this as the bracket in my post trip. So anyway, I get in there and I do the drop, and then I'm trying to find in the same place, because I've been there before. I was trying to find an empty, and I kept asking the yard jockeys, yeah, go over there. And then the next one would be like, yeah, it's over there. And I could not find JB Hunt intermodal containers for anything. Finally, I found one guy who says, oh yeah, I know we have some right back over there, which is practically right where I dropped off. I thought those were all loaded. But apparently, if you go down a little bit, like 30 spaces, that's where there were the empties. So I went over there and found 2 empties. I picked the one that looked like it was in the better condition and was pre-assigned the GP in Darlington, which I think was the same place I was pre-assigned to last time I was at that particular Harbor Freight. Anyway, luckily, okay, so here's the thing. This particular, sorry, it took a second for me to look at my note. I called the office on this because they told me that this was a live load over at Georgia Pacific. I'm not aware of a live load situation at Georgia Pacific. And they said, well, go, when you get there, see if you can see if you can get the live load done early. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not happy about it, but I'm like, okay, at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll just do the live load, and then I'll shut down around the corner at that pilot that I shut down at last time. At this point, I realized my entire day's shot anyway. I just kind of had become at peace with this. But I got to the GP, and they said, yep, you're going to drop off your container right over there and then pick up your preloaded container. I was like, beautiful. First good thing that actually happened that day. So anyway, I was able to, it was a well-oiled machine. Didn't take very much because you basically pull through the spot and you drop off, then to pick up another. Now, I was able to drive back from there. I think it was Darlington, and got on 20, went through Columbia, went through Augusta, and was able to shut down to exit 172, the Loves there. Now, the reason this is important for me to mention is I pushed as far as I could, as much as I could, because I knew that there was going to be a storm that came through. And I was going to get shut down and caught in that storm unless I could get as far as possible. My goal was to get all the way over and to drop off in Atlanta and then shut down in Palmetto, or get out of Atlanta after dropping off this container and heading north with whatever pre-assignment I was. But that got sabotaged because of the train, because of the stupid blowout, and because of the delay at getting into the Harbor Freight. So I was lucky to be able to make it to 172. Now, as I mentioned, this was important because this was a storm. There was they called it like Snowpocalypse 2025. There was a snowpocalypse in Atlanta in 2014, I think it was. But they were calling it this. Basically, JB Hunt sent out a message while I was asleep, shut down any and all drivers below 20, and I was on 20, so I was safe to drive. Anything in South Carolina, which I had just gotten out of like 30 minutes before, 30 miles before, so that's the reason why I wanted to get as far west as I could. And basically all of Alabama was shut down until 9 a.m. And I was like, okay, so I'm technically safe to drive. Or I shouldn't say safe to drive. I am okay to drive, not being forced to shut down. And I was going to Atlanta, so that was good. They said do not drive south of the city. So I had gotten up once and knew it was going to be snowing. So I went ahead and looked and tossed open my window and looked at it, and it was snowing. It was snowing all over the place. Now, also right next to the truck and in front of me where the trucks were driving around, it was starting to get compressed into ice because the temperature was in the 20s. In the South, if you're not familiar with it, we don't have dry snow that hits and it becomes fluffy and puffy and whatever, and it stays dry. No, it hits, it becomes ice, then it gets compacted into ice, dry ice, or black ice, whatever, and it makes it difficult to drive. So I decided I was going to look over everything. I started looking at traffic cameras on Georgia511.org. I started looking at the road conditions and determined that if I were to hit the road, right at that moment, I would probably be okay, but I would hit a lot of traffic. And if I started running into a lot of traffic on 20 going westbound, it was slow, and it was nothing but four-way flashers flashing, and it was going very, very slow. And I was like, it's probably because of the bad snow. If I drive out in this right now, I could get shut down. I could get stopped. The company could shut me down. They could send us a message saying the railroad's closed, something like that, which they did. They actually sent us a message right about the time I would normally start up. It says CSX is closed in Fairburn, which is not the one I was going to. I was going to Atlanta, Norfolk Southern, Burlington, Northern Santa Fe, out of Atlanta. So I said, you know what, I'm going to wait a little while and watch the traffic, watch what happens. And it got worse. It got worse to the point where all I was seeing on the very fuzzy, blurry traffic cameras on the entire area of 20, going from where I was to past 285, it was nothing but very slow moving, very rare occasional car, very rare occasional truck. And I'm like, if there are so few trucks and cars on the road, it's not safe to drive. And I was looking at the weather on Google Maps, and it was like, it was yellow, and then it turned red, and then it turned dark red. Then an area throughout, after a couple of hours, an area that was probably about 20 to 30 miles completely shut down on 20. So I remained there all night watching the traffic, decided I wasn't going to move, and so I shut down. That was my Thursday. I decided I wasn't going to move in that. Even though JB Hunt still said, and I messaged him and I said, if I do leave here, would you assign me someplace going to a safe area? He says, yep, if you get to the rail yard, yeah, we'll pre-assign you someplace north or someplace that's not shut down. So anyway, I decided I wasn't going to go anywhere because I didn't feel safe about it. My instincts, if I trust my instincts, they're usually right, or they work with me. And when I was sitting there fine, I felt just fine. But as soon as I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to hit the road, instantly, that's when everything started saying, red flag, red flag. I'm like, okay, stop. So I didn't go anywhere. There was a lot of chaos in the truck stop over the course of the night. People started barricading in and just parking wherever they could. Luckily, by the time I was leaving the next night, which was just after 6:30 p.m. on my Friday, I might add, I knew that if I hit the road just after 6:30 p.m., then, which I could do because I didn't work the night before, hopefully I would finish my entire night before sunrise and be able to maybe beat traffic out of Palmetto headed home. So I decided to do that. Anyway, I left at 6:30. I was hoping that by the time I got to Atlanta, there would be no traffic, and because everybody would have already left if they even went to work that day. Atlanta was smooth sailing. There was no traffic. It was, by the time I got there, it was like 8:30. Nobody's on the road. I went straight past 285, stayed on 20, got straight onto 75, 85 north, and then I decided I was going to pull off on the 14th Street exit and try a different way. I pulled off on 14th Street, then it turned me left onto North Side, then it turned me right onto another road. I'm like, I don't like this way. It's too many lights. I'm going to just continue up to Howell Mill in the future, turn left, turn right onto Huff, turn left on Marietta, right on West Marietta, and it's going to be a much more streamlined thing. Anyway, by the time I got to Atlanta, I realized that I was pre-assigned Linux in Orangeburg, South Carolina, which I had been to before, and I knew full and well that if I drove all the way out there again, that was going to be over 500 miles. I would never make it back in time. So I did the little thing that said reject it, and it said, what time could you make it? I'm like, I'm not going to be able to make it. So I put in I thought about putting it in for like a week, putting it in there a week. And then I was like, you know what? I should put it in for when I'm starting back up again. But then I was like, no, because this is going to mess up a potential pre-assignment. So at this point, I just put it in for like a few hours in advance. It says, okay, great, we've updated your time. I'm like, no. So I called the office again. I told the person, I cannot do this load because I'll never get back. Today is my Friday. And he's like, and he was confused. He was like, but it's only like 9:30. I'm like, yes, but today is my Friday. And he's like, okay, I'll let the planner know. And I guess they have people that start up any time of the day or night, and this was technically Wednesday, and I was starting early for my Friday, my Friday, which is Thursday. I'm Sunday through Thursday, and because this was technically Wednesday, they might have thought that I was starting up on my Thursday. Anyway, so as I was pulling into the Atlanta yard, I didn't realize it at first, but a call comes in, I answer it, and then it disconnects right after. It says, yeah, I'm one of the JB Hunt planners. I'm like, oh, okay. And then it disconnects. So I turn around, and as soon as I get through the security, I call him back. And the planner says, why can't you do this load again? I said, because it's like, 250 miles out, 250 miles back, and today's my Friday. He says, but today is you work Sunday through Thursday, right? And I said, yeah. He says, I have you needing to be done by 11:59 p.m. on Thursday night. I'm like, no, I'll be done by 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m., whatever. Or 8:30 a.m. if I run out my 14-hour clock. He says, but so why can't you do this load? I said, because if I run it out there, I'll shut down someplace on my drive back. He says, yeah, and then you could start up again and drive it back in, and then you'll be done probably about 11:30 or so p.m. I'm like, no. I said, because I'm going to be shutting down. Today was my Friday. I said, I basically start and I drive overnight, and then I take my minimal 10 hours, and then I jump back on the road, and then I drive again until my clock runs out, and then I shut down for 10 hours, I get back on the road. And I said, he says, but I'm looking at you, and you still have, he says, I'm looking at you, and you have like 20 hours plus left on your clock. I said, yeah, that's because y'all shut me down yesterday. I wasn't able to drive on my Wednesday, on my Thursday, which was Wednesday or Tuesday night. I said I wasn't able to drive. He says, so you should be okay to do this because you'll have the hours. I'm like, no, because just because I was not working doesn't mean that I'm going to work an extra day. He says, but your clock doesn't end. I said, look, all I know is that I put myself in, I put my DRT in, and and I'll be done by like 8:30 a.m. That's when I'm done. He says, well, your clock that was set, it says 11:59 p.m. I'm like, well, that's a mistake then. I don't know why that was put in there. It should be done by whatever time. He says, all right, well, let your manager know. He was nice. He was like, and I make it sound a little more direct than it actually was. I was like, no, because of this and this and this. And he was very understanding. He says, okay, tell your manager to make sure that the time for that you need to be done is not 11:59 p.m., but instead is closer to, whatever time you want to be done. I'm like, all right, will do. I messaged my manager. He never responded to me. So he's back to not responding to my messages anyway. So instead, I was assigned to Amazon in Charleston, Tennessee, out of Austell. So after I dropped off in Atlanta, I drove to Austell. I picked up the container. I then had to find, I'd never had to do a box adjustment there in Austell before. So I had to find the side lift. And it was driving around a little bit. I kept asking the yard jockey, he said, yeah, it's over there. And I would go over there, and I couldn't find it. And it ends up being way over there near all the other containers, the Maersks and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I finally got over there, made the adjustment, because basically the two front pins, only one of them would go in. So he says, what needs to be adjusted? I said, the front left pin isn't in. He says, which way does it need to go? I said, I don't know, because I'm, only been to JB Hunt for 3 months, and no one's ever told me, how can you tell which way? So I guess I'm like, I don't know. I'm still fairly new to JB Hunt. And he just kind of went by there. He picked up the back of the container, and then just basically shook it a little bit, and then put it back down and said, and did this number at me. And so I went over there, and it went just fine. So I was able to get out of there. I got to the Amazon in Charleston, and my pre-assignment was to in-gate my empty to Austell. Every time I've ever done this before, I've always had billing issues, and I've had to sit there in the stupid queue and had them fix the issues. But they say it takes like 15 minutes. So I sent a message and said, hey, can you double check the billing is going to be ready by the time I get there to Austell to Endgate? And then I hit the road. 2.5 hours later, I get to Austell, try to Endgate. There's nothing. I'm given an error. I'm like, so I call up the office. They're not answering the phones. In the meantime, while I'm waiting on hold, I send a message saying, can you please Endgate or check the billing? Finally, I get the person on the phone from the office, and they say, we'll make sure this happens. We'll have to wait 15 minutes, but yeah, your billing, we'll do it now. I'm like, thank you. So frustrated. Anyway, I got Endgated, dropped off, said, do me, I tried calling the office and asking them to route me back to Palmetto. I was just hung up after like 2 minutes. I'm like, I'll be to Palmetto. I'll run in there, refill my water bottle, and ask them to do it. So anyway, I got there post-trip, did all that kind of good stuff. There's no issues with black ice or anything like that on the road the entire time. Even though technically Palmetto is south of 285. Or 280 is south of 20. So technically, I guess I shouldn't have been driving because they said south of 20, but I was still in the metro Atlanta area and I had checked the traffic and the road conditions looked fine. So I was like, I'm going to be fine. So I drove on. I was not about to sit there and waste time if I didn't have to. So I went ahead and drove on over, shut down in Palmetto, and it was completely clear. I think the shutdown was mainly south of 20, but south of Atlanta. And they took a precaution, but I was totally fine to drive. So anyway, that was my week. Aggravating, frustrating at times, but you know what? It was a week. JB Hunt pays better than any of the other two companies I've worked for so far. But I don't normally stress, but I get so frustrated with all the delays and just trying to get someone on the phone, trying to get someone to resolve an issue, and then just like, yeah, wait for a bit. I'm like, or rail delays that they don't pay you for. Now, okay, in fairness, I have been critical in the past saying JB Hunt doesn't pay you when you're at the rail yards. Schneider would pay you $10 an hour when you're doing anything other than drive. So if I was pre-tripping, post-tripping, stuck someplace at a customer site, I was on the clock for $10 an hour. Martin did not pay me when I was at a terminal picking up the container or picking up the trailer to run out to a Walmart, and then when I came back and dropped in hook and then went back out. So a lot of the time I was able to streamline that process by calling the office and say, I'm pulling in, make sure you have the paperwork ready because I'm going to be running in there, exchanging it, fueling up and running and leaving. So I had that as down to a science, well-oiled machine. But they only paid $15 per stop. But the stops sometimes were quick, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes it was a delay, like a long delay. Sometimes I was in and out of there in as little as, I think the shortest one was like 6 minutes because I had one pallet to drop off someplace. It was like 1:56 right before lunch. I pulled in, I jumped out of the truck, I went running and banging on the door. The guy was like, yeah, we're just about to go to lunch, but yeah, he says, you don't have very much to drop here. I said, one pallet. And he says, well, I'm ready if you are. So he grabs that. He has the back already open. I literally broke the seal. I said, you want to break the seal? You want me to? He says, no, you break it. So I opened it up, did the thing, drop it. He picks up he starts pulling it out. I'm literally lifting it up and dropping it, pulling the seal out, dropping it down. He signs the paperwork and I'm out in 6 minutes. Quickest thing ever. Quickest 15 minutes or $15 I ever made. Probably ever with any company, because I don't think that's ever like $15 for 6 minutes. I don't think I've ever done it before. Anyway, so I guess I technically can't be critical of JB Hunt because they don't. If you're picking up in Palmetto to deliver someplace, or you're picking up at a different terminal, or you're picking up in a rail yard, they don't pay you for that. What is annoying is when you're not compensated and you're there for over an hour, then they start the clock. Technically, Martin never paid you for any of that, any of the delays at the terminal. There was very few times though that I was delayed for that kind of time though. they would always say, yeah, go back to your truck and whatever, chill out. But they always worked with me and got me back on the road as quick as they could. The biggest frustration that I'm having right now with JB Hunt is the uncomfortable truck here. I don't like the fact that it's very weak. It's a bare bones basic as far as I'm concerned truck. It functions, but it doesn't have like opti-idle, so it shuts itself off after not too very long. And it's just trying to reach the office, lack of support, lack of communication back from my manager. I will see if they will consider hiring me to join their team. If not, I don't know if I'm going to stay at JB Hunt. I preferred Martin, where I could always get someone on the phone, even though it didn't pay nearly as well. I was slip seat with Martin, which is annoying, because I was basically working 5 days. I was off 3. Worked 5 days, off 2. If I went back to Martin, what I might do is work 6 days, be off 2, work 5 days, off 2. I don't know. I have to figure it out. But regardless, I did email my manager and asked if I would be able to talk to someone about joining the office team. I also emailed my former manager, Martin, and said, would you take me back? So I will see what happens this week. Because if I am working at Martin and I can get, because one of the things I said in my email is, can I get back? Would you take me back under the same terms as before? Home weekly or home daily starting at like 5 p.m. And then I said, Martin doesn't pay as well as the company I'm working for, but I like you guys much better. At least the office worked with me and we started working very symbiotically. If they needed me to hustle something for them, they knew that they could count on me. And when I left, they were not happy to see me leave, but happy for me. But I would go home every single night. I would have time to do other things. And I got to sleep in my bed. And that means a lot to me. So I'm going to have to do some soul searching because I may not want to stay at JB Hunt much longer. We'll see, though. Anyway, that's that. That's it. Thank you for watching.